everyone. So today we're really going to deep dive into what's going on in Florida right now. After Hurricane Milton, you're probably seeing a lot of different reports from CBS, Miami, CBS News, even some stuff straight from the White House.
Yeah.
And it can be kind of tough to figure out like what we really need to know, with everything else going on. Plus the election's right around the corner. So we're going to try to cut through all that noise today and try to really understand the situation on the ground, but also kind of the political battle lines that seem to be forming.
Absolutely. And I think, there's so much to unpack here. We have the immediate needs of the people in Florida, but then thinking about the long-term implications of, these increasingly strong hurricanes. It's a lot.
It really is. And I think it's easy to get lost in like all the political stuff, but we really want to start with the human impact here.
Yeah.
Because ultimately that's what matters most, right? And we're talking about 10 confirmed deaths already, which is just heartbreaking. And then hundreds of thousands of people still without power. It's hard to even fathom, being in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those numbers, while tragic, they really underscore the human toll that these storms take. And it's worth noting, officials have said they believe the death toll could have been even higher if not for the evacuations. And, it seems that recent experience with Hurricane Helene just, a few weeks ago really drove that point home for a lot of people.
Yeah, I was going to say, you would hope so, right? Like that people would learn from these things. But I do wonder, you've talked about this idea of disaster fatigue. And it makes me wonder, like, if and when another hurricane hits, will people be less likely to evacuate next time? Because they think, oh, we rode it out before, we can do it again.
Right, and that's kind of the million-dollar question, isn't it? As these storms become, unfortunately, more frequent, more intense, how do you maintain that sense of urgency and caution, without sending everyone into a panic? It's a really tough balance.
It is, and something, definitely worth paying attention to as we move forward.
Now, shifting gears a little bit to the federal response. President Biden was just down in Tampa promising aid, over $600 million worth.
Right.
But it sounds like this isn't just a blank check, right?
Right. And that's something that's really important to highlight. The White House press release actually gets into some specifics, and they're saying $47 million each is going to go to Gainesville Regional Utilities and Switch Source. They're partnering with Florida, Power and Light, and all of that funding is specifically for strengthening the electric grid.
So it's not just about getting the lights back on, it's about making sure they stay on.
Exactly.
And that this doesn't happen again. And we seem to be hearing a lot about this idea of grid resilience lately.
Absolutely. And I think that's a direct response to, the realities of climate change that we're seeing. We're past the point of just reacting to these events, We need to start proactively building infrastructure that can withstand them. Yeah, we can't just keep rebuilding the same way and expect different results, right?
Exactly.
And that kind of brings us to the other storm brewing here, and that's the political one. Because, with the election just a few weeks away, it's no surprise that things are getting a little heated. So while folks in Florida are, dealing with the very real and immediate impacts of Hurricane Milton, it seems like there's this whole other storm brewing, and it's on the political front. It's almost like, disaster relief has become, unfortunately, this bargaining chip in this election.
Right. And that's not uncommon. Sadly, we see this kind of thing play out often, when you have a natural disaster coinciding with, a big election.
Right. Right. And it seems like that's exactly what's happening right now between the White House and Congress. President Biden's calling for immediate action on that emergency funding we were just talking about. But House Speaker Mike Johnson, he's a Republican, by the way, representing part of Texas. He's saying, well, Congress can wait until after the election to sort all that out. It's like, wow, really? It makes you wonder, like, what are the priorities here? Are we actually putting the needs of the people who've been hit by this hurricane first, or is it more about political maneuvering? It's a tough look.
It really is. And as if that weren't enough to make you a little cynical about the whole thing, there's this other layer to it, and that's the misinformation that's swirling around. President Biden even came out just the other day to address some of these false claims that are going around, specifically about FEMA and how they're responding. Yeah, and that's what's really scary in these situations, right? It's like the spread of misinformation, especially during a crisis like this, can be so incredibly damaging. It just sows confusion, it undermines trust, and then ultimately, it could even prevent people who desperately need help from actually getting it.
Exactly. And we're not just talking about, rumors here. I mean, there are some pretty serious accusations being thrown around. We've got Donald Trump, the Republican presidential nominee, claiming that the Biden administration is specifically withholding aid from disaster victims who are Republicans.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, how do you even respond to that?
It's really sad to see, because it's like, and to add to that, there are also claims going around that, FEMA's completely out of money, that they spent it all on immigrants, who are in the country illegally. And it's like, first of all, it's not even true, but like, even if it were, it's like, come on, people need help. And this is not the time to be playing politics with people's lives.
It's scary how easily some people could be misled by this stuff, especially when they're already vulnerable. They're desperate. They just went through this horrific event, and it's like they're getting kicked while they're down almost. And it makes you wonder, like, what is the intent behind spreading this kind of information? What is the end game here?
Yeah, it definitely makes you question motives, doesn't it? Like, who's benefiting from this? It certainly isn't the people on the ground who need our support the most, that's for sure.
No, it's not. And sadly, this political wrangling, this fighting, it's not just at the national level, right? It's also creating some tension within Florida itself.
You're right.
And a prime example of this is, the relationship, or maybe lack thereof, between Vice President Harris and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Yeah, we've got reports of DeSantis, like, dodging Harris's phone calls and then accusations about, trying to politicize the disaster response. It's a lot, Although Biden did say just the other day that he and DeSantis get on very, very well. So who even knows what's going on behind closed doors, right?
Right. It's like, are we performing or are we actually trying to get stuff done? And it really makes you think about this, on a bigger level, because it feels like finding common ground, working together. It's almost like we've forgotten how to do that, especially in these really highly charged political times. And it makes you wonder, like, who benefits from this?
Yeah.
When we're constantly at each other's throats, it's definitely not the people who need help the most, that's for sure.
No, absolutely not. And it's a good point to bring up because it brings us back to that bigger picture. We've got this immediate crisis in Florida, the human cost of Hurricane Milton, lives lost, families displaced, entire communities just devastated, trying to rebuild their lives from scratch. And then you zoom out a bit and you've got these long-term implications of these storms that seem to be getting stronger and more frequent. And it's not just about rebuilding, it's about rebuilding differently, stronger. And through it all, we have these political battles, the misinformation, the lack of cooperation. It's a lot to take in.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I think for people at home, watching this unfold, it just highlights how important it is to stay informed, to really think critically about the information that's coming at you from all sides, and frankly, to demand better from our leaders.
Yes, 100%. We can't let disaster relief become just another political football to be tossed around, for political points.
Yeah.
So as you continue to follow what's happening in Florida, the recovery efforts, we want to leave you with this. Think about the future. In an era where these mega storms like Milton and Helene, they're becoming the norm. Should disaster relief, providing aid to people who desperately need it, should that be subject to political games? Or should it be something that's guaranteed, a right for all citizens no matter where they live or who they voted for? Something to think about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Hopefully this has given you a better understanding of this complex situation in Florida, but also the challenges that, frankly, we all face moving forward. Until next time, stay informed, stay curious, and we'll see you next time.